This is a presentation on physical disabilities and other health impairments by Alexa Williams, and this presentation is being brought to you by somebody with a physical disability and other health impairment. So this should be fun. We're going to start off with other health impairment. Now, when I first heard this, I was like, that seems like a pretty vague term. So I wasn't quite sure what exactly it would encompass. We're going to go over a couple things that term encompasses a little later on. But an other health impairment is defined as a chronic or acute health problem that can affect a child's educational performance. So nothing that falls into its own specific bracket, but any kind of underlying condition that can interfere with a child's health and their ability to function normally throughout the school day. We're going to get into that a little more. Epilepsy is one of them. Now, epilepsy is a neurological condition that causes frequent seizures. Epilepsy can be genetic, so you can inherit it from your parents. Or it can be caused by an underlying condition, which we'll get into that a little bit later on, that relates to me. Or a severe illness. It can be brought on by any kind of severe illness. It can be or it can be caused by a traumatic injury to the brain. And the types of seizures are generalized, partial, tonic-clonic, and then absent seizures, which used to be known as petit mal. We'll get into that. Medication is usually the way that we manage epilepsy in children in most cases, but in really severe cases, they can actually operate on the part of the brain that is affected. Now, as I mentioned earlier, seizures can disrupt a student's in-class experience. They'll go into seizures at any time. There's no predicting it. And they can go on for quite a bit, but you can't always stop what you're doing in class every time a student has a seizure. So there will be times where you have to catch that specific student up on what they have missed. They may injure themselves when going into a seizure and have to go home. They may end up spending some time in the hospital because of frequent seizures. They'll fall down. That can make the injury more severe if they fall against a hard surface, something like that, hit their head. And this condition can really only be diagnosed by a physician. Asthma is another health impairment. Asthma is a chronic lung condition characterized by airway obstruction, inflammation, and hyperirritability of the bronchial tubes. Asthma attacks are usually linked to genetic factors, but they can also be triggered by the environment, so like polluted air, if there's a lot of pollen in the air, dust in the classroom. The classroom is really dusty. It's going to trigger a child's asthma. There's 2 different types of medication to manage asthma. There's they have their non-emergency inhaler, which a student can carry on them at all times so that they can just give themselves that at any given time that they may start wheezing or having trouble breathing. So they can self-administer, and they're allowed to have that on them. It's not like any other medication where you'd have to go to a nurse in order to take it. But the emergency medication, that they would definitely have to go to a nurse to see, and the school nurse in the school should be notified on how to administer that and what to do in the event that the child needs their emergency medication. So a student with asthma is they have a harder time when the weather gets cold. They're more likely to develop lung problems. So they may be expected to miss school due to illness, specifically in the winter months. Or there are times where they're going to have to be exempt from PE because you don't want them out. And running laps, obviously, that can trigger their asthma. If the weather's bad, that can trigger it. So there are times where we have to make those kinds of exceptions for students with asthma. You can't always expect them to be able to participate in phys ed or anything too physically demanding like you might expect other students to do. And again, this condition can only be diagnosed by a physician.